what are the various factors which affect the amount of depreciation? Now students, when depreciation on any fixed asset is charged, there are various factors that influence the amount of depreciation. The first of these factors is the cost of the asset. Cost of asset. Now students, the cost of the asset means the amount that has been spent to acquire that particular fixed asset. It includes various factors as per historical cost principle. It can include purchase price, that is the amount mentioned on the invoice. Then it includes any repairs or maintenance charges. Maintenance charges at the time of purchase. Obviously, this is applicable in case of second-hand assets. I'll mention for second-hand objects. Then it might include transportation and installation charges. So now students, the cost of the asset is the first factor that determines the amount of depreciation. And the cost, when we use the word cost, it includes the purchase price of the asset, the repairs or the maintenance charges at the time of the purchase if it is a second hand asset, then transportation and installation charges, and any other charge at the time of purchase. Any other charge at the time of purchase. It might include sales tax for the government. It might include any brokerage or commission charges that are to be paid. So now the first factor is the cost of the asset. Coming to the second factor that affects the amount of depreciation, that is the scrap value. The scrap or the residual value. Now, what do we understand by scrap or residual value? Scrap or residual value represents the value of the asset when it has surpassed or it has been used for its entire life. It will be sold as scrap. Obviously, that amount of original cost would be recovered as scrap. So, it is a very major factor which determines depreciation. It represents amount recoverable at the end of useful life as scrap. This amount will be recovered from the original cost, hence it is not used for calculating depreciation, or rather we should say that it is deducted from the cost while calculating depreciation. Now students, the difference between the first and the second point, that is the cost and the scrap value, is also called as residual value. Residual value. This is equal to cost value minus scrap value. Now students, the third point that affects the amount of depreciation on any asset is its useful life, or in other terms we refer it to as commercial life. It represents the number of years or the time period for which an asset can be used. In case of fixed assets, that is, for fixed assets, it represents number of years for which it can be used. It can be used. And in case of what we call as intangible fixed assets, in case of intangibles, it would be the number of years in which the legal rights will expire. Number of years for which we hold the legal rights. We hold the legal rights. Let's say you have patents for 5 years. So then depreciation would have to be charged for 5 years. If you have a copyright for 10 years, then the depreciable number of years obviously would be 10. So now students, what are the various factors? First one being the cost of the asset. Cost includes purchase price plus any expense that is incurred at the time of purchase. The second point is the scrap value or the residual value. It represents the amount that is recovered at the time of sale as scrap. And the difference of these two is called as residual value, that is cost value minus scrap value, or residual, we should write this as residual depreciable value. That is the amount that would be actually taken as depreciation. Then useful or commercial life, it represents the number of years for which the assets can be used. And in case of fixed assets, it is obviously the number of years, but in case of intangible assets or intangibles, it represents the number of years for which we hold the legal rights.